Hey y'all, Eric here. After doing some contemplating, I'm just going to jump on here and talk about what's going on in North Carolina in the middle of municipal elections going on in our state and around the state and cities, particularly even here in Charlotte. So, the North Carolina General Assembly is back in session as of Monday, and the sole focus is not writing a budget because North Carolina is still operating on the 2024 to 2025 budget levels. Yes, North Carolina doesn't have a current budget, much like the federal government. And the leaders of the General Assembly, Dustin Hall on the House side and Phil Berger on the Senate side, both are, in my opinion, some of the worst bootlickers and ring kissers in the MAGA movement from any state because of what they're about to do. The only exception to that probably are the bootlickers and ring kissers in the state of Texas and the bootlickers and ring kissers in the state of Missouri. Now, before anyone jumps up and starts screaming and pounding their chest about California and what they're doing, the difference is the redrawing of the maps to favor the Republicans versus the redrawing of maps to favor the Democrats. California has redrawn them, but they're giving that power where it should be to the people of California. And so the people of California will decide if California will go all blue. Even though they vote blue, they will decide if California goes all blue with the redistricting. The states of Texas and Missouri, and soon North Carolina, will enact these laws and redistricting, which will go into effect beginning the 2026 midterm elections. And in North Carolina, the governor cannot veto this bill, and the people will have no say in stopping this bill. The only power the people of North Carolina will have is if there are enough people in District 1, and that is the district they have identified, to expand it so that the incumbent could not possibly win it. To give the House another seat for the sole purpose of keeping the House, the federal House, in the Republican control. Yes. Now I looked at, I looked at the North Carolina Constitution. I'm trying to learn it to find out, to see if there was anything in the Constitution that could stop this. Because all the Republicans are saying is that, well, we have every right within our power to do this. Well, first of all, redistricting is only supposed to happen during census years. The next census year is not until 2030. Now, with respect to that, I'm not just going to lay this at the Republicans' feet because the Democrats in North Carolina have done the same thing, have redrawn the districts to favor themselves in off census years. They've done the same thing. And I can talk just as much crap about the Democrats as I can about the Republicans, and most sometimes I do on the federal level. What is happening, and to give this context, President Donald Trump sent out an alert to all Republican controlled states to tell them And you can look it up. It is a fact. He said it, and that's why North Carolina is in the foray now. To redraw the districts to favor Republicans in the 2026 election so that the House will stay under Republican control. First of all, that's how scared they are. Because if they weren't and knew that they were going to win it back, win it and keep it, they wouldn't be doing this. But essentially, he has given the order to Republican states to redraw their districts under the guise of it being legal. When the district redrawing, the whole purpose of the redrawing of the districts during the census taking is based on population increase or decrease. It does not affect the Senate, but it affects the House of Representatives. That's how states have representation and why the numbers aren't even. It is based on population. But like I said, this is not a census year. And so essentially what they're now doing out loud, under the protection of the MAGA umbrella, from the leader of the MAGA union, President Donald Trump himself, at the behest of the imp, Stephen Miller, and Pam Bondi, and other advisors, and they're using this to say, the people of North Carolina gave a mandate that they support Donald Trump's agenda because Donald Trump won the state of North Carolina over Kamala Harris. Really, if that was a mandate about the agenda, then why didn't Mark Robinson, who was the Republican candidate, why didn't he win the governorship? Why didn't the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor win the lieutenant governorship? Why didn't the Republican candidate win the attorney general position? Why didn't the Republican candidate win the Secretary of State position? Why didn't the Republican candidate win the Secretary of Education or the Superintendent of Education position if there was such a mandate? There wasn't one. There wasn't. Just my opinion. I can't prove it. People just didn't want a black female president. That's what that was. Because I can tell you, had she been elected, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in now. We wouldn't. But that's not the subject. Well, it is sort of the subject of this video. But today I want to talk about that there is a way out on the federal level. And this is where I'm going to talk crap about the Democrats. Because they've had ample opportunity to do this in the Senate. Ample opportunity. And that is the Freedom to Vote Act. The Freedom to Vote Act. It is not law, but it can be. The first time that it was brought up, and I'll dive into it a little bit deeper in a minute, was in 2021. It passed the House. It failed in the Senate because of that nasty little thing called a filibuster. That you have to get 60 votes to overcome the filibuster. And so far, the Democrats haven't been able to do it. Oh, but we've got Democrats who will more than happy jump to the Republican side. John Fetterman, Kristen, I can't pronounce her last name, and I forget the third one. But those three always seem to jump over to the Republican side. Quite frankly, I don't even know why John Fetterman calls himself a Democrat. I don't. Christie, I don't understand why she calls herself a Democrat. I don't. She's not there. She's not running again anyway. I mean, I do believe she's going to declare herself to be an independent or a Republican once she leaves her Senate office. So, how we got in this mess was due to the Supreme Court. So, in 2019, there was a case called Russo versus Common Cause. The Supreme Court of the United States decided that partisan gerrymandering claims are political questions that federal courts cannot decide. So the federal courts' hands have been tied by the Supreme Court, which means that the only courts that can be in this conversation are state level courts. And I can tell you within North Carolina, because judgeships are partisan, the state Supreme Court is heavily leaning towards Republicans, 9 justices with a 7-2 majority. And they always side with the Republican-controlled legislature, whether it's lawful or not. The reasoning behind the court's decision is that the court found that the U.S. Constitution does not provide clear, objective standards for determining when partisan gerrymandering is illegal, leaving it to states or Congress to address. This decision removed federal courts as a venue for challenging politically drawn districts, leading many to turn to state courts, and this was actually detailed by PBS at the time. And so I'm no constitutionalist, I'm no law jurist, I'm not that well versed in the law, but it seems to me that if the state courts can talk about this, and they're wrong, and the courts are to decide the constitutionality of a law, why then is it did the Supreme Court say that federal courts can't do this? And they're saying it's because the U.S. Constitution doesn't have clear and objective standards. Well, that's fine. Then send it back. And so that's essentially what they did. Now, they said that the state has to do something or Congress has to do something. Here's where the Freedom to Vote Act comes into play. So Congress has the authority to pass federal legislation to ban partisan gerrymandering and establish national standards for redistricting. The Congress has the authority to do this. Efforts to pass such legislation have faced challenges. For example, the Freedom to Vote Act, which is what I've been talking about, would have banned partisan gerrymandering, passed the House, but like I said, failed in the Senate due to lack of sufficient votes to overcome a filibuster. And there have been efforts to remove the filibuster, to get rid of the filibuster. But the Democrats didn't want to get rid of it. And the Republicans certainly don't want to get rid of it. Now, currently, Congress is not enforcing a federal anti-gerrymandering law for partisan map drawing, but some federal laws, such as the Voting Rights Act, prohibit discrimination based on race. Well, I mean, it's already been brought up by my representative, Alma Adams. I mean, you could draw a line to it and say that it is, what they're doing is racist, because the current representative of District 1 in North Carolina is an African American male. And they're drawing it so that a Republican will win the seat. And so, but they're saying that they did not draw the map based on ethnicity. They drew the map based on voter registration. And essentially, what that means is, you remember how Trump used to talk about the 2020 election was stolen by the Biden people? And there was this whole campaign about stop the steal. What do you think this is? And they're doing it in the light of day. They are stealing the 2026 elections. They are taking the power away from the people of the state. They are redrawing districts, whether it's North Carolina or Texas or Missouri, and writing the lines so that disenfranchised groups, and I'm talking about black and brown people, will no longer have power. Apologies for the mufflers and everything in the background because I have my window open because it is a nice crisp 57 degrees, so I just letting the air in. They're just being blatant about it. And the reason is because North Carolina gave a clear mandate that they agree with um, Donald Trump's administration and his plan, and so they have to do this so that the Republicans can keep control of the House. No, no. They're doing this for several reasons, actually, but the only ones I've been thinking about is once the representative from Arizona gets her oath taken, and I'm not going to delve too much in that because that is a whole separate video. They have to release the Epstein files. All they need is one more vote, and she has vowed that as soon as she takes her oath of office, she will cast her vote in the affirmative to release the Epstein files. Mike Johnson sent the House home so that they wouldn't have to take a vote on it. Sent them home so they wouldn't have to take a vote on it. And there is Republican support to release the Epstein files in the House. There is. But again, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House, major bootlicker and ring kisser in charge. And I'll remind you that Mike Johnson is third in line in succession to the presidency. If anything were to happen to Donald Trump or J.D. Vance, yes, he becomes President Johnson. Yes, elections have consequences. And so here's where I have a problem with senators and Democratic senators in the Senate, because it cannot pass in the Senate, the Freedom to Vote Act. And this actually was created to honor a representative who nearly lost his life in a march to Selma, Alabama. And this Voting Rights Act, Freedom to Vote Act, was actually created and thought processes by him. And he passed away and did not live long enough to see it passed. So the Freedom to Vote Act is a proposed federal bill that aims to establish national standards for voting access, reform campaign finance laws, end partisan gerrymandering, and provide greater election security. First introduced in 2021, the legislation has repeatedly passed the House of Representatives, but has been blocked by a filibuster in the Senate. So yes, the House doesn't have a filibuster. And here are the key provisions. If it passed, the act would introduce a variety of changes to federal elections. Voter registration. It would mandate automatic voter registration at state DMVs, as well as same-day and online registration options in all states. Early and mail-in voting. All states would be required to offer at least 2 weeks of early voting and no excuse absentee voting by mail. It would also standardize access to secure ballot drop boxes. So I will call to memory. I don't have the pictures to pull up, but I'll call to memory. I believe it was in Oregon or Washington or both, where you saw during the past election that mail-in ballots were being dropped off and those boxes were being set on fire. Again, to stop Kamala Harris from winning or even coming close. Mm-hmm. There are moves in Georgia and in the state of Texas to get rid, and I believe South Carolina is thinking about this too. Um, that is the home of transphobe Nancy Mace, who's running for governor of South Carolina, who are trying to get rid of early voting, and they're trying to find a way to get rid of absentee ballot or absentee voting. And I was trying to say balloting when I meant voting. Then, where voter access and security is concerned, the bill includes provisions to restore voting rights to formerly incarcerated individuals, because I believe on a federal level, if you are convicted, you lose your right to vote. And then, when you're trying to vote, it depends on what state you're in as to how long it will take you to get your right to vote back, if you get it back at all. But this will take care of that. After they complete their sentences, you paid your debt to society, and so you should be able to get all your rights back. It would require voter-verified paper ballots and transparent post-election audits. The end to partisan gerrymandering. The act would ban partisan gerrymandering in congressional redistricting and require states to follow uniform criteria for creating new districts. And then we're talking about the money. Where campaign finance reform, it would curb the influence of dark money by requiring greater disclosure of major political donors and strengthening oversight on super PACs. Quite frankly, just every time you get a donation, disclose who it is. That's simple. Disclose who it is. Why should you be ashamed of who's giving you money? That you're beating your chest on the Senate floor about anti-vaping and non-smoking, yet the tobacco companies are the ones who are funding your campaigns. Something's not right with that. Something's not right with that. Yet you're talking about how young people are being priced out and they can't afford mortgages on homes. Yet the majority of your campaign donations are coming from those same banks that deny those mortgage applications. Something's not right with that. And then the election administration. The bill includes protections for nonpartisan election officials and strengthens enforcement of election rules. So let me work a poll alongside of a MAGA person, and I swear to God, I would have magnifying glasses in both hands, making sure that they don't even twitch out of line, because they were trying to do the same thing during the counting of the election against the Democrats who were counting ballots. And yet these people are supposed to be nonpartisan. And so what I would ask you to do, coming off the No Kings rally weekend, that this is probably one of the best calls to action. The House is doing its part. They keep passing this legislature. I mean, I can send my request to my state's two senators, Tom Tillis and Ted Budd, but they're both Republicans. And Tom Tillis is not running for re-election anyway. Roy Cooper is a Democratic candidate. He's a former governor, former attorney general. chances are whoever has the most money wins, right? Well, his war chest is full. And I can already tell you, I'm casting my vote for Roy Cooper. I am. I am a registered unaffiliate. I'm an independent, but this independent's vote is going to Roy Cooper. And then I will ask, one of the things I want Roy Cooper to do is to champion the Freedom to Vote Act. And quite possibly just do the right thing and get rid of the filibuster. Just get rid of the filibuster. And then maybe the American people will see that some of the people who are in office don't need to be in office because of the gamesmanship that they do with our money and with our lives in the federal legislature. So that's my bit for the day. If you don't live in North Carolina, if you don't live in South Carolina I think is actually a little worse because they are about to give the federal government every single piece of information about every single voter in the state of South Carolina. Can't wrap my brain around that. Look it up. Look it up. It was in the news. It's been in the news for a week now. And the Department of Justice is the one who's requesting this. How much you want to bet Nancy Mace has something to do with this? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just saying. But anyway, y'all have a good day. I will see you on the next one. And remember, elections have consequences, but resistance is not futile. See you.